Well, thank you for all being here to our Offsite Construction Series, which is the second Tuesday and the last Tuesday of the month at 4 o'clock Mountain Standard Time. We are thrilled for our next guest. I'll speak a little bit more further about Salla and Microsoft, but welcome. Modular Sure Site is the presenting sponsor of our Offsite Construction Series, which, as you may know or may not know, offsite construction includes many forms of different types of construction, including volumetric, panelization. There's just a plethora of devices that are under this umbrella. So we are here to have conversations and include our audiences from coast to coast in order to start communicating and being able to align ourselves with new forms of construction and having these discussions. So with that, we'd like to introduce our partners. Mountain View Window and Doors is one of our partners, which actually I'm hoping that after our COVID is kind of over, or at least subsided, we'll be back into the showroom of Mountain View Window and Door and be able to have our event back in the live service, which is always exciting. So I'm going to give it to Scott. Scott, why don't you take it away and give us a little overview of your company?
Thanks, Audrey. So I'm Scott Hicken. Hello, everyone. I'm not Devin Tilley, sharing my boss's Zoom account. I'm the marketing director over at Mountain View Window and Door, premier window and door supplier and installer in the state of Colorado. Really into forward-thinking construction and building projects. We have a few modular construction projects. Actually, literally today, Devin was out at one of our modular projects in Winter Park installing some windows in there. So if you have any window and door needs, hit us up. And like Audrey said, usually these events were held in our showroom before COVID started. And hopefully after COVID is over, we'll go back to having some great events in our showroom around offsite construction.
Absolutely. I love being there. It's actually really fabulous.
It's beautiful.
Our next partner is Greg Crom's company, which is 303 Development. When I started Modular Sure Site 3 years ago, we have partnered, and he basically was a traditional builder that would do remodels, multifamily, commercial, and high-end custom homes, and now has a division in offsite construction or volumetric building. So thank you, Greg, for always being supporting and kind of one of our treasured builders in the marketplace. Urban Air Living offers these amazing ADU or auxiliary or accessory dwelling units, which are smaller homes, and their specialty really is the smart living spaces that make 500 square feet feel more like 800 square feet. They are a national company. They have partnered with Champion and Genesis Homes, so they're able to fulfill across the United States with 14 different plants. So if you're looking for something more efficient and you're looking for some really innovative home design, interiors and exteriors, that's really what this company has achieved in a very small amount of time. So we hope that you'll go and visit them on their website, and we're glad that they're a partner of ours as well. Last but mostly exciting and efficient in the marketing arena is the Art of Construction. So I'm going to let Scott get back on and talk a little bit about this amazing platform.
Thanks, Audrey. So Art of Construction is a construction media platform born out of Mountain View Window and Door here. We now have a podcast nearing on 200 episodes, 400,000 unique listeners. We also do marketing and technology, architectural and development and real estate services for all sorts of forward-thinking AEC professionals. As you see, that's one of our modular projects in that picture that we just had last week here in Colorado. So you can listen to the podcast. We have an entire series we did with Audrey as well called System Built Lifestyle. We're trying to connect all the latest and greatest technology to all the latest and greatest AEC professionals, and doing this event is right in the middle of that. So thanks, Audrey.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you guys. So our special guest is Salla Eckhardt, and I met Salla, I think maybe about a year ago, might be a little bit less than that. She is a wonderful resource of technology-driven data. Her company that she represents is Microsoft, which is not a small company, as we can say, but definitely a big powerhouse in the industry of technology and digital transformation. She's my girlfriend, I almost feel like, from Finland, and now resides on the West Coast. And I'm excited to have her come and present. Basically, when I talk to her, I've met her many times and heard her speaking, and it was really interesting because I couldn't wrap my head around how this all worked. And when I spoke to her last week, she said, you know, Audrey, think of it like this. You know how you have like an app on your watch or your phone where you're, you know, you're running and you're taking care of your body, and it kind of gives you this data and information. That's kind of the same thing that we do in buildings, in new buildings and old buildings. We put these sensors in there and we're able to collect data to kind of find out what's going on in the building and the life cycle of the building. And I'm like, oh, thank you. That makes so much sense to me, Salla. So Salla, take it away.
Thank you so much, Audrey, and pleasure to meet you all. Let's see if I can get my screen shared so then we can get started. As my background, you can probably tell from my speaking that I have a little bit of accent. So like Audrey said, I'm originally from Finland, and that's where I graduated as a Master of Architecture, Master of Science in Architecture, and then continued my study track as towards PhD in construction management. I was already studying civil engineering and construction management, but then decided that it doesn't make sense to have two masters in the same industry. So I kind of mixed my career plans already early on, and then kind of eventually ended up developing my career to a digital building lifecycle that is now the emerging business model for the AECO industry, and kind of the foundation for today's topic, the digital frontier of AECO digital transformation. And with that, I ask everyone to think in their head about building information model-based design and engineering, how that then transitions to offsite construction and industrialized construction in parallel to the digital construction of traditional ways of building on site, and then how we might accumulate all that good data that has been used for design decisions and optioneering, cost engineering, value engineering, and for managing the construction sites, to really consolidate all those as designed, as engineered, as built models as a foundation for BIM-based digital twins and infrastructure digital twins. And that way we are all on the same page as we start this journey. One warning, I only have my laptop screen, so I don't see what my next slide is. So there's an element of surprise, but I think we can still manage this. And like Audrey mentioned, we had a discussion about how might we actually talk about the digital twins and BIM and this data and information and knowledge-centric world in a way that people can relate to. And here is a dashboard of someone's fitness program that you can start kind of using for tracking your overall wellness and health, your sleep rhythm, what you're eating, how much you're exercising. This dashboard basically tells the digital truth of the person who is tracking their body's total performance, basically. And that way, when they are starting their next day, they can kind of start driving their decisions about their nutrition and activity levels, their relaxation and sleep, based on the evidence and the data that they're collecting about themselves. So when we think about our own bodies, we can use the same analogy for thinking about buildings. Buildings basically have the same infrastructure as our bodies have. They just look a little bit different. It's fairly standardized, and everything kind of relates to everything. So if something is broken, the entire total performance takes a hit. And sometimes it's a little bit difficult to kind of pinpoint where the issue or the problem is. But with data and the collection of data and kind of the federation of data and refinement of data into information and clustering of the information, and it gives us more insights into how things are performing and why they are performing that way. But let's continue on to the overall topic of why we are going through the digital transformation and the digital building lifecycle journey, and why we as an industry should change. And when thinking about the overall AECO industry and how the productivity and profitability of the industry have been in decline ever since the 1960s, and there's a huge opportunity gap between how much labor cost and how much productivity the current ways of working actually produce for the projects, and how the real estate owners have had the tendency of just throwing money at the problems and hiring the world-class architecture, engineering, construction teams, and then kind of washing their hands off from what they have actually commissioned. And overall, they've had kind of maybe separate tracks on thinking about their capital expense that is related to how much the designing and engineering and the construction of the project costs, and separating that from the operational cost. And everyone who is in the industry know that 80% of the total cost of ownership is accumulated over the operations and the maintenance and use phase of the building, whereas the 20% is accumulated during the capital expense of the project. And when we are thinking about the overall rule of thumb of how much we are talking about, is that if we invest $1 into design and engineering, everything that needs to be field coordinated during the digital construction phase, it's $10. And then if things are postponed to be fixed or maintained or changed during the operations phase, we are talking about $100. So every wrong decision that we as a real estate owner or investor basically make during the design phase, or we don't make like data-driven decisions, it costs us 10 times more in construction or 100 times more in operations phase. So with that framework, when we are thinking about the real estate owners and investors, we have to think about things from the financial perspective, and understanding that real estate owners and people who work in real estate, they usually come from banking background or law background or anything that is not necessarily the AEC industry background. They think about real estate as an investment, and they use financial tools to drive their decisions. And they're not necessarily very technical people, but then they are the ones who make the ultimate decisions and pay the bills. So when we are looking at the beginning, we have to like wrap our minds around the annual spend. And when we are making the decisions about, are we going to increase our annual budget or are we looking to decrease the annual budget? From the financial perspective, if we increase it, we should be expecting a better product or a better service. And this is where already the industrialized construction and volumetric construction, modular construction comes to play and shows its power, that if we are looking at better product, it means that we have to have better performing built environment. And we all know that if we can fabricate and manufacture or assemble things in factory conditions, there are less variables in what's happening on the construction side, but we can really manage and balance the overall environment where things are being delivered. If we are looking at improving the services, that ties us into the end user experiences, people's wayfinding, dining, parking, transportations, mobility, you name it. The overall end user experiences are something that a lot of real estate owners are now looking at as their North Star. And probably it's one of the reasons that since it's been so difficult to manage the built environment itself, the physical artifacts, that they've seen a better opportunity at creating these building as a service type of services for the end users and really focusing on those experiences. If we are looking at lowering the annual spend, then the real estate owners should be looking at how might they actually create profitable growth and invest that excess money into new projects. And that, again, is an opportunity for greenfield, brownfield, grayfield, blackfield developments, and starting to have the discussions with the manufacturing industry and industrialized construction companies of what their perspective is into creating these infill projects or improving the existing infrastructure. The next box that you see in blue is about smart environments and how the smart environments, they're not only anymore the physical environment that we are talking about and thinking about, but it is the federation of or consolidation of physical, digital, and social environments. And the physical environment is the one that we are all kind of familiar with when talking about the AECO industry. So it's the buildings, it's the infrastructure, it is everything that is tangible and part of something man-made environment. But then the social environment is the people and why they choose to arrive into these physical environments to do what they're there to do. It might be a strategic workplace, it might be their home, it might be some of their hobbies, it might be a third place of work. Anything that is the reason for us to gather or arrive into a physical environment to do something. And then the digital environment is the digital truth or the digital replica of the physical and social environments, and really creating us the overall understanding of how are the end users and the physical environment actually coming together and how we might actually harmonize their coexistence. Trying to find a balance is probably something that nobody can really do, but we can always look into how might we harmonize their coexistence. But when we are thinking about developing these environments, the real estate investor or the owner has to really think about two different streams. They have to have clear understanding of their investment strategy. And depending on what type of real estate owner or investor you're dealing with, some might have very short-term investment strategy. They start the project, but they already sell it by the evening if they start the project in the morning, and they trade real estate as if they were trading stock. Then you are dealing at the other end with real estate owners like my company, Microsoft, that we developed to hold to our legacy portfolio and continue improving it as the technical life cycle of the buildings go forward. But the investment strategy kind of splits into the capital expense and the operational expense. And with the capital expense part, we need to use building information modeling for cost engineering our options of how large the building is going to be, what kind of systems do we choose to put in there, what kind of materials and products are we choosing to have in our physical environment. And that way, when we are having this asset-centric approach to things, we can really kind of keep our tabs on constantly checking that how much cost are we accumulating with the choices that we are making during the design and engineering phase. And that way we're not being surprised with a very hefty price tag at the end and arriving into the value engineering phase where traditionally all the aesthetics and all the smart qualities and everything that is modern and new and cool gets stripped out. And what we end up with is something that we've always been developing for the past 100 years. In this graph, the value engineering doesn't have that sour cling, but it's more about how do we manage the operational costs of the built environment during the design and engineering phase and really start to kind of compare apples to apples in terms of who the supplier is that is actually going to be delivering us the very specified manufacturer-specific system or the product. And that way, when we are comparing that, are we going with option A, option B, option C, we are comparing what the requirement specs are and making sure that every one of these suppliers are capable of delivering what the benchmark is for the technical performance of our building or the social performance of our building. And if anyone is capable of adding more value into that investment, we're not only choosing whatever is the cheapest option that might be cheap as an individual investment into the physical thing, and then costing us an arm and leg when operating it or maintaining it, but we can look into what kind of supplier or manufacturer specific data we can embed into the building information models. And when we are analyzing and simulating the technical performance, we understand that what is the total cost of ownership. And that's something that a lot of real estate owners have not been looking at until the building information models and now emerging digital twins are capable of providing. When looking at the lower half, the design strategy, again, that's where during the planning phase, the real estate owners need to set the stage for the AEC teams and define a solid design strategy of what their expectations are in terms of the total cost of ownership, but also the quality of the environments and the overall expectations about the physical, digital, and social environments. And with the design strategy, there are basically three streams that we need to follow. That we can look at the building as a product, and that reflects the physical artifact. And when we have the 3D model enriched with parametric and attribute data, and we can feed it more with like social environment data, we can run simulations based on what the digital artifact looks like and feels like. And that way, if we are interested in simulating, for example, how might people exit a building in a very secure and safe manner in case there is a fire, we can simulate that. We can simulate how a certain amount of people can exit the building using the infrastructure that has been designed. And that way, if there are any changes that need to happen, we can run the simulations as many times as we want and really verify what does it actually mean if we follow the design intent that has been provided for us. And that way we can optioneer the geometry of the building and make sure that it's meeting our design strategy in terms of safety or aesthetics, accessibility, connectivity, sustainability, etc. If we look at the building as a service, we can analyze that if we have a certain type of system in our building, that how much is it on average going to be costing us to operate. So if we are looking at, for example, indoor comfort level, and we want to make sure that we have a acoustically and thermally pleasant open office environment, we can add a little bit of cost data into it and run analysis of how much would it cost if we had an average peak attendance of certain hours per day for a certain amount of people, and that way derive this financial data for our confident decision making. The third line is for the end user experiences, and this is one of my favorite ones because then it ties us into the extended reality platforms and how we might leverage the 3D models and all the material data and product data and all the simulations and analysis data into a digital platform that we can then experience. So we don't have to continue to read the documents that are 2D drawings and then flip through paper, stacks of paper and read Word documents or PDFs and try to make sense of what we are supposed to be deciding on. And so the extended reality kind of puts a stop on fake it till you make it type of workflow. And it's really providing us more visual data, and it allows us to manage the visual content of the data, manage the teams by democratizing the data in a format that everyone can understand and comprehend. And if there are questions, then it's easier to understand that what is the question about and what does it actually mean if someone is proposing that we need to make a physical change or a digital change before something is actually built into our environment. And that way we can start resolving constructability issues much earlier on, accessibility issues much earlier on, sustainability issues much earlier on, and really have a shorter project lead time into decision making. And we can have these at-glance experiences of these environments rather than wait until the physical artifact is actually built and then realizing that, oh no, this doesn't really meet our design strategy at all. We need to start our tenant improvement process right away, and it's going to cost us X amount of dollars. But overall, when looking at these three streams, these support us in understanding what is the total performance of our environments and how is the natural environment or the surrounding environment impacting the indoor environment of our physical artifact, and how the end users are tying into that total performance as well, that even if we have a very well-balanced physical environment, we have the unknown element of the end users that continue to go and crank up the heat in the building when they are feeling cold as an individual, or cranking down the cooling when they feel like they are hot, and they just completely mess up the overall harmony of the HVAC system. And that way, even the LEED certified buildings are not meeting the LEED certified performance because we have the end users who don't know what they're doing. But with the extended reality, we can kind of help the end users and the operators and maintenance people to really have the roundtable discussions about what we are actually doing with our built environment. Going forward, problem statement. So here is the opportunity gap that I was talking about. And when thinking about the traditional projects, we have a lot of issues and problems that exist. So the projects, they tend to be very fragmented, meaning that we might have a serial developer who has regional teams that are developing regional projects, but they don't necessarily have any knowledge transfer between them. People don't tell about their stories. They don't share anything about their projects. Very fragmented. And with that, lessons learned are never documented, which kind of makes everything very expensive, because every time that we start a building project, it's almost as if we had never built anything before. And overall, the project lead times are very too long. There is a lot of variance in the quality, and building on active job sites, it's still very unsafe. So overall, the traditional projects are very unpredictable, which kind of leads us into a understanding that maybe shifting more responsibilities from the on-site construction to off-site construction and into factory-based industrial construction, we might actually start addressing the knowledge transfer and skill level improvement, the cost control, the project schedule control, the quality control, and the safety control in a way that they all improve, and overall the opportunity gap starts to kind of enclose itself. So hopefully that will be the direction that the industry is going to be taking. But it requires us to start going through the digital transformation, which kind of brings us to another issue or problem, that people who've been in the AECO industry long enough have gone through these digital transformations. And nowadays, there are so many different options out there, different platforms, different software, different hardware solutions, that people have developed this technology fatigue, because they've tried everything and yet they didn't really see the magic or the overall big improvement in their projects. The productivity continues to decline. The cost of everything continues to increase. Nobody has been able to resolve all the 7 or 8 wastes that exist in the industry, etc. So overall, we need to have a mindset change and really start addressing things as a more transformational change instead of these incremental improvements that continue to fall short. And overall, we as an industry, we need to start collaborating more and having more integration between ourselves, our teams, break down the silos and start integrating the technology tools and the digital platforms that we are using, and that way stop finger pointing at whose responsibility it is to change. Here is the image that I wanted to show you guys, because this is basically the traditional industry that we are dealing with, that we have an architect design a sketch on a napkin and it looks beautiful. It is art. But then they end up having these multitudes of different design phases and design rounds that then end up with very beautiful illustrations about the project. But when we are talking about drawings, there's no way of extracting reliable cost data from these drawings. There's no way of using these drawings for schedule management, for quality management, for communications management, for safety management, nor are we able to study what is the sustainability aspects of this project, or is this project accessible or not? So overall, using the drawings for communicating the complexity of projects continues to fall short. Hence, we need to start adapting to new ways of working and really start addressing what actually needs to change. And one of the layers that we need to start changing is the mindset of what are we actually focusing on, and what is the center of our universe, or what is the final North Star and the overall deliverable that we should be looking at. And previously, everything was schedule centric, and the industry thought that if we just create a very, very tight schedule, we can squeeze everyone to deliver the project on time, and we will be saved. We will meet the cost objectives, and we will meet the quality objectives, and we will have a very happy real estate owner. That obviously didn't really work. So then the industry shifted from schedule-centric into cost-centric, and really started keeping track records of how much is the project spending, how much resources do we have, how much budget do we have, but that didn't really resolve anything either. So now with BIM and digital twins and the opportunities that come with them, we can start taking this data and information and knowledge-centric approach. And when we think about the digital twins as a framework, digital twins enable us to federate multitudes of different streams of data into an entity that is then consumable for a human being, but it's also consumable for machines. So when thinking about factory-based manufacturing, fabrication, assemblies, etc., that data is easily translatable to robotics and automation, and overall driving that human-machine collaboration forward. And what makes digital twins so interesting is that they represent virtual and physical assets as equals. They're no longer separate entities. They are not in conflict between each other. It means that whatever you have in your physical environment, you have the digital version of it, the digital truth of it available for you in a format that you can then choose what kinds of data resources you want to be federating together, and you have all the control to choose what data is relevant for you. So digital twins are not limiting your options of what you want to consume or kind of combine together to provide you more insights about the total performance of your environments or the products and your total cost of ownership. And when thinking about the 3D models and all the enriched data that is linked into the models, you can start using the extended reality technologies for reviewing your projects. As you can see on the right side, these two people are using the Microsoft HoloLens for reviewing a city, a smart city plan. And you can visualize the data that you have available for you, and that way also filter the data that you're actually seeing, and that way making it more meaningful for you. So when thinking about, for example, a city development, you can look at the geometry of the buildings and the city infrastructure and see what it looks like. You can simulate traffic flows. You can start comparing the thermal performance of different buildings between each other, and really extract the data of heating consumption in different neighborhoods, and see that how are the physical artifacts and the legacy buildings from different eras and different decades actually performing against each other. And that way, when looking at things as a city developer or a big real estate developer, you can start seeing the opportunities of where you might want to kickstart your project planning, and which areas have the most potential for revamping, and what your options are in terms of redeveloping neighborhoods or individual buildings or infrastructures. And to kind of give that support for the overall industry level, this illustrates kind of overall the state of the art globally, that where are we in terms of digital construction, digital twins, BIM. Depending on which region and market you're working with, you might have the BIM level 3 people working with you, and people are already using full-blown building information models to ND, certainly for 3D, 4D, and 5D, 3D being the geometry for construction coordination, and 4D being the time element tied with the 3D. So you have the 4D scheduling, or you have the 5D cost control. So you have the 3D model and the time and the resources and the cost all federated together. But a lot of real estate owners still live in the BIM level 1 world, and they continue to ask the AC teams to deliver them the traditional drawings, in worst case, even on paper. But in order for us as an industry to really gain benefit for the sake of improving the productivity and profitability of projects, and really supporting the industry that now struggles with profit margins of maybe 1%, we need to make the digital leap from all these BIM levels to at least BIM level 4 to gain that foundational capability for going forward with the digital twins. And what it means that we need to take the standards and adapt to global standards that have already been defined and are applicable to every region, and then start developing the information layer on top of that, and then the technology layer on top of that, and then arrive at the business layer. And overall with that, when we are using these integrated web services and adapting to cloud as an infrastructure, so instead of hosting data on your personal computer, we host data in cloud. We can start developing cloud as a service and cloud as a platform, and that way start creating these integrated solutions between different technology providers and that way developing the very solid digital core, and that way choosing which tools are actually supporting people as decision makers drive forward their businesses, and technology is the support for building up those capabilities. And that way, when we reach the maturity level, BIM level 4 and beyond, we can start really seeing that how does the digital building lifecycle start to unravel, and how all the decisions that we are making in the early phases of the digital building lifecycle are actually affecting the later phases and the overall management of the total cost of ownership. The digital building lifecycle that I mentioned already in the beginning of the presentation, this is a very simplified version of it, but this is what I started with. And this really puts more and more accountability and responsibility on a real estate owner, because they are the ones that kick off every project, and they are the ones that make the investment decision, define the digital building lifecycle strategy, define the design strategy, and begin the project. And then once the real estate owners have clarity on what they're actually commissioning and what the expectations are in terms of the technical performance of the buildings or the social performance of the buildings, then it's fairly easy for the AE teams to design and engineer the design intent and optioneer that what the real estate owner can choose from, and deliver also the cost analysis and the total performance simulations to back up their design intent, so that the owner is confident in making the decisions, and they are very much aware of what effect does their decisions have on the overall project. And then when we arrive at the phase 5, instead of creating the construction documentation that is part of the traditional process, we would be considering implementation documentation and really thinking through that what might we actually create offsite? How might we actually prefabricate things, pre-manufacture things, and leverage the data that has already been delivered by the design and engineering teams? And how might we actually leverage the knowledge that the fabricators and manufacturers, suppliers have in terms of their own products, and how they might be supporting the original design strategy of the real estate owner, and really help the owner to understand that how are their solutions and their products creating the added value in the overall technical life cycle of the building. And that way, the manufacturer companies become very essential part of the BIM-based supply chain. And that way, all the data that is being gathered from the design and engineering teams and from the construction teams are also gathered from the manufacturers. And that way, when we arrive at phase 9, which is basically the handover of the building to the owner, we get the handover of all the critical data that is required for the owner operations and the facility management. And we also gather the as designed, as engineered, and as built models, as record models, and use them as a foundation for creating the digital twins, so that when we are managing and operating the building, we don't base our decisions of making the changes on time, but we base it on the condition of the building. And that way, when we are monitoring the performance of our built environment using the sensors that are the IoT sensors or Internet of Actions IOA sensors, we start to understand that why is there a need for retrofitting or renovating the building, and what are the tenant improvements that need to happen into our legacy portfolio. And that way it's data and evidence-based decision making rather than just something that is based on a calendar. And that way it restarts the digital building lifecycle every time that there is a change, but we can continue to accumulate the data so that at the end of the physical lifecycle, we know exactly what products, what materials we have in our environment, and then we can kind of start ramping up our ambition level of waste management when something is being demolished, and really aim at zero waste, and really think about what might be upcycled, what might be recycled, what might be reused, what might be a new resource for developing new products. And that way, the real estate owner is being more conscious about what they are leaving behind as they are creating something new into our environment. How much time do I have, Audrey?
Yeah, so we're going to try to maybe wrap this up in a minute or two. We have a couple of questions, and I'd like to keep it open for Q&A because this is super amount of information. So, and we do have a question from Tim. So if you want to wrap up in the next minute, and then we can try to answer some of those questions, Salla, that would be amazing.
Okay, I'll go through a few illustrations real quick. So this is what a building information model and time, so the 4D schedule would look like. We have all the assets in the right places, geospatially located, etc. And then all that same data can be then used during the manufacturing process, and we can see the health of the project and see all the metrics of the project as a dashboard, and really kind of share that content with the entire project team. And then when we are building something, we can leverage the extended reality platforms for overlaying what hasn't been built yet with what actually exists in our environment already. And that way, when we arrive in the operations phase of the building, we have all that data already there. So we can then continue tracking how the building is actually being used and how that building is actually performing, and create these at-glance dashboards. But that was it. Time for Q&A. Thank you.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. I'm just trying to open up some questions really quick. So Tim, do you want to ask your question? Because I always think it's nice when people can ask their own questions. Would you like to ask Salla a question?
Yeah, thank you for that, that presentation. There's a ton there to chew on. My question has to do with, in your experience, what's the ideal developer avatar and building segment or building industry segment that would most likely adopt this digital building lifecycle in its entirety? And the reason I ask that is we deal with a lot of large developers that do, thousands of units a year of whatever their segment is, and they still have an AOL or Earthlink email address. And so, they're sophisticated in their own right, but definitely need to make adjustments. So they need to get started. And then you have your other developers who may be more sophisticated. So what's the ideal developer that could adopt these practices quickly?
Good question. In today's world, I see that anyone who is like a serial commercial real estate developer would be ideal, considering like Microsoft that has campuses all around the world and really holds on to the real estate portfolio. And those who have massive portfolios overall that have the annual spend that they need to adjust every year, then I'd see that there's a market for them, because if they don't have enough clarity on what assets they have, how those assets are actually performing, it's almost like burning money. So adapting to this approach will be very beneficial for those who are either very big real estate portfolio, or not necessarily big as a company, but have like a substantial portfolio to manage, or those who are building a lot of new or improving the existing. I wouldn't necessarily offer this to a one-off home builder, but if there are companies that are building a lot of homes and are interested in seeing how their product is actually performing, I do think that they would be a market segment as well.
Thank you, Tim. That was awesome. Evan Grant, would you like to ask your question? You probably have to unmute.
Hopefully video is working there.
Yeah.
So thanks first off. I guess the question that I had is, can you kind of talk through some of the sensors that actually show like energy savings, for example, as you're operating, over a building's entire cycle?
So for the specific sensors, I would have to mention specific companies, but to kind of wrap things up is that there is already the technology available. It's just a matter of plugging it into a common data environment or a digital integration platform, so that the data that is being created or collected with the sensors is actually then put into use, rather than just cold stored into a database and then never used. So overall, the technology exists, and it's already basically off the shelf on the market. It's just a matter of plugging the Internet of Things system into a cloud platform where you can then build your monitoring solutions on top of, and then connecting overall the system into the digital twin platform, so that when you are consuming the data, it is in a consumable format and not something that is just a very long list of database information that kind of just drains the eyes but doesn't really give you an understanding of things.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Evan, for that question. Andrew, would you like to ask your question? Hold on, it won't work. Let's see. All right, well, we have a little technical issue with Andrew. So I'm gonna read his question, Salla. He was saying, are you active on the business development side?
I guess I would have to ask a follow-up question, that business development side of Microsoft product development or real estate development, or what kind of business development side are we talking about?
Sales or solution design. He's saying sales or solution design. Are you a part of that team? The sales?
No, I'm fully on the internal real estate and security center of innovation side. So thinking about how might we digital transform how we own and operate our building stock.
Okay, thank you. Rez, do you want to ask your question, please? You'll have to unmute.
Thanks again for the great presentation. So my first question was about understanding the best practices and the lessons learned to improve adoption with less sophisticated owners. How can they be educated?
That's a very, very good question. And overall, the approach that I've taken is that change management is tough on everyone, and everyone welcomes the change as long as it's not them that need to change. So I've started to kind of create training programs and these bite-sized training modules that people can either attend as in-person trainings or independently with online trainings. And that way they can choose the pace that they want to be learning and changing things, but I'm definitely not keeping them in their comfort zone. So overall, the education part is something that those who need to be educated, they need to be active. So engaging people into their own transformation journey is important, and taking the responsibility of learning the new ways of working, new practices, and really setting the North Star for the overall organization that is learning and transforming together, so that nobody's left behind. And I know that everyone's using the same analogy of like the waves lift all boats at the same time. That's the approach that not only focusing on our own personal training and learning, but how might we actually pull everyone else along, and really sharing the lessons learned with others, and sharing more of our own stories, and dragging everyone along when we are learning. Because if we improve too much as individuals. The same thing happens with companies that only worry about improving their own processes and their own tools. They end up too far ahead that nobody sees the line of sight anymore, and things just kind of fizzle out or get shelved. So kind of keeping the pace up, keeping everyone informed about the positive changes, and that way kind of generating this social capital and the excitement with the peers. I think that would be the way to go forward.
Thank you. Charlie?
Yeah, thank you so much. That's very thought-provoking. So I posted 2 questions, but I think I'm going to go with a third. I'm really like your wheel of 1 through 11, and my question is, with offsite construction number 6, are you starting to see a movement? We learned this from some Asian partners, this concept of soft modular versus hard modular. So soft modular, you do your design with modules. So you're not stick building BIM, for example, and then hard modulars you go and build. So the question is, are you starting to see number 6 offsite pull forward to kind of be in parallel with 2 and 3?
Yes, and the change that I'm seeing, it depends on the market, and especially in the Nordic countries. I had a discussion with one of the largest general contractors, and they are prefabricating a lot of things, mostly due to the fact that it was already in the 1950s that the urbanization of like Finland was so rapid that they just couldn't withstand building on site everything, doing the concrete pours on site. So they already started developing the industrialized construction industry in the mid 1900s. And now they are so advanced that they don't need any documentation on site anymore. And they're basically building like Lego blocks, and they are so digital that everything is basically pre-manufactured and fabricated, and the manufacturers, they are already feeding the data from the building information models into their assembly lines and the fabrication lines. So that's one example of very advanced market. But then there are others where it's more of that mix, that where is the modern construction industry meeting with the traditional construction industry, and how the contracts are actually supporting choosing to build offsite. So now what I see a lot especially in the North American market, is that the existing contract templates are actually holding back the industry from digitally transforming. And in regions like APAC, they are already more flexible in that, or they have more freedom of choice, and they are starting to spearhead going forward with more offsite construction.
Good, thank you.
Thanks, Charlie. That was a great question. Thank you, everybody, for all of your questions. And Salla, what an amazing presentation. And it's so great that we had you for the time that we did. And we're super excited to see the transformation, and we know that it's coming. So it's great to see that Microsoft is spearheading this, especially with this technology that is coming and evolving, I guess you could say.
Thank you, Audrey. It was a pleasure to speak to you all and see the questions in our group chat and hear the questions as well. And I look forward to staying in contact on LinkedIn and meeting everyone in future events as well.
Yeah, me too. Thank you very much for that, Salla. So coming up on our next presentation, which is Tuesday, September 8th, we have Tom Hardiman, the Executive Director for the Modular Building Institute. He is going to be speaking on behalf of issues and opportunities in the modular construction industry. So we hope that you can join us. It should be pretty interesting. He's very knowledgeable, and he's been in the business for quite some time. So it should be great to hear from him and bring your questions. It will be a great interaction, I believe. We'd like to thank all of our partners again, 303 Development, The Art of Construction, Urban Air Living, and Mountain View Window and Doors. Without them, this would not be possible. So we always cherish and value those partners. And here is information about us. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Please feel free if you'd like an introduction to Salla. I'm here, Audrey Grabesic on LinkedIn. I'm happy to help. And until then, we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you all for being here. We hope you have a great Tuesday night. Enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.